Hey folks, this video is part of a series on GitHub Copilot feature highlights. To find the other videos, go to github-copilot.zebia.ms. Hey folks, this is a demo on some of the nice things that you can do and work with if you're using MCP servers that recently came available for tools like Visual Studio and other editors that have the support already for them. This is not meant as a how to set up everything and how to work with certain things, but just to inspire you of this is some of the power that you get when you start using MCP tools and really know in your head what you're trying to do and how you can implement certain things. As an example, I have a GitHub repository. You can see that I currently have 6 open issues that I should do something with, and it's just a super small web application that I push into an Azure environment so that I have multiple things that I can work with as well. I'm working with this inside of a code space because inside of a code space we have VS Code available. I have a couple of MCP servers running, so just a little bit on the configuration. Um, I have, for example, here a GitHub MCP server running with the latest version that is available, 0.2.1 for example. Beneath that, I have an Azure MCP server running as well. I have configured it to log in with my Azure credentials. And you can see here at the bottom even, I have a Playwright server running locally in that code space as well. I'm starting off with an empty Copilot instructions, and I have some steps that I'm taking to show this demo, for example, as well. So if you want to follow along, then definitely grab a screenshot, for example, and follow on this later as well. I did make sure that I am excluding this file from not being used by Copilot because I wanted to have a fresh environment every time that I ask it, and I don't want to prefix it with certain things that are already in the file. Because as you know, context is key for Copilot, and it will use whatever files you have open, for example. So that's why I excluded MCP, sorry, it's a hard acronym, is used inside of agent mode. Whenever you're doing something with GitHub Copilot, in agent mode, you choose a large language model of your choosing of what you want to do. I'm using an example here with GPT 4.1 that is currently in preview just to test out how well that works. And whenever you then work with a prompt that you send in there, Copilot will first try to look at, is there an MCP server running that provides a tool that matches the current prompt that we have? You can see I have 80 tools already available in here. I have the GitHub MCP server that is up and running, so that shows that it has some tools in here. And one of the tools that is available, for example, is list issues. What Copilot does is it looks at your current prompt and it checks then for all of the tools that it has available, which of these tools could help me with that specific prompt, and then I can try to execute that specific tool. So if I say, for example, hey, list the issues from the current repository, it will try to match what it has seen in those tools, and hopefully it will find that there's a tool available that actually matches. Sometimes this demo even says, oh, sorry, I can't assist with that because it didn't figure out it could use the tool already that was there. In here, you have options to see what the inputs are for calling this specific tool. You can see that here it says, hey, I'm going to list the issues from an owner and a repository. Of course, it saw that we're using a GitHub repo, for example. But you can see here that it immediately says we're using that as the owner, which is the user. Well, I have a user handle, and that is definitely not user because that's probably taken. So here you can actually update it manually and say, hey, you need to go to that specific owner. That is incorrect. Unfortunately, the state of what the things that you have in here are not saved. So that is good to be aware of, because if I now run this, I can actually have some consent in here. So I can say, hey, allow this while I'm doing certain things. And my notion tends to be for things that just list things that get requests to the server. That's usually fine because that is not something that can break an environment. If I want to add certain things and create new stuff on the server side, or I'm going to delete things, well, I definitely want to have some user consent here. So be a little bit wise what you say here. I tend to go for the default of I allow this in the session because listing issues is just something that just can work against the server, so that is fine. So let's execute that. And then note that I changed that owner as well. You can see that it picked up 6 issues that we have in the repository. And if I go to the issues, you can actually see, hey, the last one's missing school prize for a specific school event. So we do have 6 specific issues in the repository. Again, be aware that if I list that again, so I cleared my session context, so it doesn't have anything there. Here we can see that this is definitely non-deterministic. It tries, but Says, okay, I can't help you with that. So let's try that again. And hopefully now it will find actually the owner that needs to be there. And it's interesting that it says, okay, now I need the owner and the repository name that we actually do things with. I can scroll up because this is part of the conversation. So again, this is really showing the non-deterministic setup of large language models and when you use them. Let's clear the session again and let's try that again. Let's see what it says. I don't have information, so I need that owner and name. So that's interesting. It almost feels like my demo now goes in the direction of I'm picking up the things that you're saying. Let's say from the repo then, because I do want to have that tool executed in it. And since I said, well, list the issues directly, currently the interface doesn't show you what it ran with. But because we now know, hey, the standard runs with user and then the repository name, that is incorrect. So knowing that these are some of the things that are happening there can definitely help you. One of the ways to work around that is knowing that this repository is usually something that works a little wonky inside of VS Code. So I can add that to Copilot instructions because those are always sent in there as well. So just add that whenever I refer to a current repository, use my user handle as the owner, and this is the repository as well. You can imagine that this could also be an MCP server that lists information from the current context. And it could say, hey, current repo will always search on your machine for do a git remote, for example, and use that specific remote. So if I say this again, even in the same session, it now uses two references. It says, hey, we have a Copilot instructions, for example. So it should then run list issues. And if I open it up, you can see that it's actually listing those issues from my user account. So now I've made sure that whenever we work with the GitHub MCP server, it knows the right context that we have in there as well. So these are some of the open issues that we've already seen. I can do the same thing against my Azure environment. So let's continue the conversation. I still have that file not sent in as context. So I'll start over and say, hey, list all my Azure subscriptions, for example. This should pick up that here there's an Azure MCP server running. There is a tool called Let's List the Subscriptions. Again, this is a GET request, so I can say, okay, whenever you do that, I'll allow that. It will execute using the credentials that I gave it and says, okay, we have one subscription available. So I can build on top of that. You can see how I'm doing this in a step-by-step manner. I'm building up extra context in this chat conversation so that I, again, have more information available in the things that I'm doing with Copilot. So I'm building this up. I need my Azure subscriptions. From that Azure subscriptions, you can see I've got 4 resource groups. I can pick up the resource group where my application is running. It's called High School Web App Demo. Get all the resources there so that we have all the Azure resources I've got available in here. And keep in mind, we're still doing this in agent mode. So what agent mode tries to do is I have a question, I need to execute a tool or bring that information back, for example, and maybe update everything that I have in the current repository. Again, this is running the Azure MCP extension. You can read a lot of more information on what it is going to do. And here it says we're going to call the command resource list from that, and I want to have that as JSON. Seems good. So let's continue with that. It's now calling that tool in my name. So that is under the cover, is really calling the Azure API with all the information that was there. We can see we have things running like application insights. I have an action group on there. We have a smart detector in application insights. We have a web app running and an app service plan. The web app is there. And we have web test and metric alerts even set up. I could now say, okay, I have extra information with that JSON context that is not completely shown here. But if I open up the tool, then we see all the information that got back. Extend the location where this is running, this is a web application, provisioning state, all that information is available in the context of this chat conversation now as well. So I could use the prompt based on this information. Let's create an architectural diagram, use Mermaid, for example, and inject that into my README file. I didn't add a README file here in the bottom as extra context, but with agent mode, it will try to search everything inside of your repository and says, okay, I found a README file, so probably you wanted to have this there. Here, dear user, here is all the information that I have. This is how I would set up an architectural diagram. Also note that it actually removed some of the things that I have in here. So I'm not that happy with removing the stuff that was there, although it was super simple, for example. So you can make some choices here. Should I actually accept these things? Yes or no? But for this demo, of course, I'll accept it because I want to show you that we now actually have a mermaid diagram running in here as well. And apparently my editor isn't set up correctly, so it fails to show the architectural diagram. So I'll leave that as an exercise for yourself, probably there. I can search for all the failing availability tests for the web app as well. You can see that it now actually finds failing availability tests for the web application as well. So due to some prompt engineering magic, and I've ran into this before already, so I could preemptively have that. You can see it's not perfect, but this is really helpful in a lot of things as well. But you see how I'm building up more and more context to actually be able to find all the log analytic workspace information that we have in there around failing web availability tests from application insights. And now is where the real magic comes in. I have a prompt set up where I really go all out, and let's see how well that works. You can see that here in my prompt, I have said, okay, now for each failing web test, we have that information available in the context of our chat history right now. I want you to create a new issue in the current repository, which is my user repository, and include as much information as possible in the issue description, include the location in the code where the test is failing. Give me all that information in the issue because I want to prep that we actually start building on with that kind of information as well. And we have seen that the MCP server can both read extra context from the server, but also write back to the server, which is in this case GitHub itself, and we want to create some issues in there. So let's see if it can actually figure out, based on that information, apparently it wants to search the code that we have in there. So let's get locations or get users in there. Fine, let's see what that does. Looking at the information in the repository right now, where we already do something with users or locations, because that is part of what we have in the application here. It's a miniature web application that does something with campus activities at your local school, for example. You can see now it wants to create issues as well. It has the right owner, it has the right repository, and based on the availability test that we just pulled up, it says, okay, we need to fix something there. This is the title of the issue we're going to create. There's a body with some information in here. So be aware. Since this will actually write to my application, this is the point where you actually need to be cautious as well. And you can see that even GitHub already preemptively said, let's make sure that, hey, this is coming from somewhere. And this is actually VS Code that does this, saying this tool is from the owner GitHub. It's an MCP server, so do be aware of things that are happening in here. It is happening with your token that you have configured. So security-wise, always be sure that these are the things that you're doing. So let's create this issue. I had 4 failing tests, so I expect 4 issues to be created. This is number 3, number 4. Apparently there's a 5th one now that wants to create as well. So I'm curious to see what happens there, because I thought we only had 4 failing web applications. You can see that it even gives back in natural language. Hey, these are some of the things that I'm doing. I'm even looking at where the code is living that I'm suggesting to properly fix. It's most likely in the server.js file that I have in this repository, because that is where all the logic currently lives, for example. I can now even go back to my repository, refresh the page, and instead of 6 issues, we actually now have 11 issues open. So I've created 5 different ones: Japan East, the failing web test, get locations, get locations, get locations. Another one for France Central there. So it found 4 failures for get locations and 1 failure for get users. And if we open up an issue, we can see that this was created by me. So this is the proof that it is using my credentials for this kind of information. And we have information with, hey, the test name was get users. This is the error message, for example. And we expect this to be in the server.js, for example. Okay, sounds good. It even says, well, hey, we actually created this issue automatically based on failing application and availability insights. So pretty nice. And you can see that I can probably even work with the prompt that I have set up to add extra information. I could say skip this specific message, for example. Add links back to the failing web test in Azure. I could go super fancy all out with this. So this, you could try to make this even bolder and more broad in there as well. I have, for example, a prompt in here where I tried this out a couple of times and I failed to actually succeed here. This is really where you can see that this is becoming a stretch right now at the state of where we are. And you can get these steps done in there as well. If you do them again one by one and take them through, basically take the AI by the hand and do every step that you have. You can see that I have in here just for all the issues that we just created, loop over them, create a new local branch, prefix the net branch name with something, make the necessary changes to actually fix the issue, and that is where it really starts to be interesting to see what it does there. Definitely do that and then review the local changes, but don't let it automate everything from there as well. It actually implemented a new JSON file, we switch to a new branch, but then you say, okay, let's start committing the changes to the branch. And that only focuses on the files that were currently changed, for example. So if you already have a file change open, which you can see in the tools bar in here, then it really starts to become easily confused because it doesn't have all the context that it needs for specifically this kind of prompt. I can probably work my way around it. There's an MCP server for Git, for example, that might look at local changes and embed that as well, but that means really incorporating that in every single prompt that you have there. So we're not in full, I have a task, start executing it right now and not in that mode yet, because we really need to be preemptive and add a lot of extra information in the prompt to be a little bit of confident of what it is really doing. And I think it's also fair to show those kinds of examples as well. This is where things break down because this is really a lot of steps in between. It's too ambitious. I can imagine that if you do this one by one, make it smaller and talk to the AI in little steps, you can definitely get this done as well. So commit the changes, push the changes to the remote, and then create a pull request for you. And these are things that we normally do as developers anyway. So we're probably prone on going through those steps one by one, and that can definitely speed up your way of working. So with that, you've seen some of the powers that MCP gives you. You can install lots of tools. It's super early days, so be aware of security that is in there as well. But you can really bring in a lot of extra context to Copilot and then let it execute tasks on your behalf as well. Just be smart of the things that you're doing there and know that you already can do a lot of this as well. Usually it means that you're switching a lot of contexts. For example, I do a lot of things in the CLI. Creating a pull request is something that I tend to do in the CLI pretty easily. But you can bring in that kind of extra context into Copilot as well. So I tend to use this now to bring in extra information while I'm creating an issue, for example. Let Copilot help me write the issue body for a lot of the information because I can pull in my failing web test, for example. I can prep certain things already. And then let it create the issue in my name, for example. And then I would start working on that specific issue again with the help of Copilot, bring in the context from the issue into my current chat window. If there's a lot of context there already, I can try to ask agent mode, implement the fixes for this. Which means I still need to review what is happening there, but it can bring already a lot of extra information into this workflow and making your life a lot easier. So with that, now you've seen what you can do with MCP servers in GitHub Copilot. Visit github-copilot.zebia.ms for the other videos.